Hello everybody! I thought I would do a quick little video going over some Mythic Plus survival talents overview, because there's been a lot of confusion and sort of back and forth in the community over what talents we like to play. I'll go over sort of the main choices and how you might sort of adjust those choices for yourself. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope this will be one of my shorter videos, but also give you all the information you need. Alright, so what you're looking at on your screen right now is basically the build that I recommend for what is optimal. This is the build I run in practically every single dungeon. There's not much variation that I would ever consider doing. I think the first thing I should actually address is, what about hero talents? So hero talents, 99 times out of 100, I recommend Sentinel. So Sentinel just has more straight up output, but it is not quite as bursty as Pack Leader. On the other hand, it does have its 45-second cooldown back for basically every single pack, and it's a lot very flexible in that way, that you'll always have pretty decent damage, and you don't have, like, your damage is just more flat and less spiky. That can sometimes be a good thing. It can also sometimes be a bad thing, and that leads me to Pack Leader. So Pack Leader is basically a 2-minute super big burst sort of spec. This can be nice in some dungeons, but when you just look at like the raw numbers sort of overall, Pack Leader will usually come out behind Sentinel, on top of being generally a bit more difficult to play. So, but what about the Owl Azor, you might be asking? What about Lunar Storm? Because you put down Lunar Storm and inevitably the tank moves things out of it. Yes, I am taking that into account in my recommendation. Do remember that Pack Leader has a very similar mechanic, that one of these things that you have to maintain all the time to be optimally powerful, which is Howl of the Pack, which is basically tied to your pets and your personal melee uptime. And this buff is going to drop between basically every single pack. And just like how in real life you're going to get less Lunar Storm value than, say, like The Sims or like what you would get on paper, you will also get less Howl of the Pack efficiency in real life compared to what you're getting on Sims. So in terms of like practical applicability of these hero talents versus sort of what the cold hard numbers of The Sims says, they're roughly equal in this respect. I will also say that Lunar Storm you can play around intelligently a lot more than Howl of the Pack. Like, there's just not much you can do about having significant downtime between packs. Like, sometimes it's just part of dungeons that you're literally mounting up and moving to the next section, you know. Think about like City of Threats. This is probably like the worst possible example, but you sort of get the idea. There are big movements and this buff will just drop really regularly. Whereas Lunar Storm, you know, especially on single target, let's say first boss Stormbreaker, like if you know the boss is going to move soon, you can just hold your bombs a little bit to put down the Lunar Storm. Like, as long as you have a Lunar Storm ICD tracker, you can get pretty close to Sim damage out of Lunar Storm in most scenarios. So yeah, TLDR, you should play Sentinel in like 95 out of 100 cases for Survival Mythic Plus. Now we're getting into sort of the build itself. So essentially, this is your baseline build. So with this talent removed, this is basically what you're dealing with. Maybe this. So the question is, so we have two flexible points, and I would even argue they're not that flexible, but let's roughly 2 flexible points. So what I recommend running for most, well, not necessarily most people, but what is optimal is running Flanking Strike, but no exposed flank, and Ruthless Marauder. So in the past weeks, and I'll try to make this video as timeless as possible, but there's been a lot of back and forth about, like, do you even run flanking? What about Sulfur-Lined Pockets and Ruthless Marauder? What about Sulfur-Lined Pockets in general? What about exposed flank? Is it bugged? So let's take those in reverse order, I guess. Exposed flank is bugged as I make this video. I will put a pinned comment if they fix the bug on this video, but until that comment appears, you can assume that exposed flank is bugged. How is it bugged? Everything below the top 3 lines in this tooltip, essentially, it doesn't work like 90% of the time. What's happening is that ticks from the Bloodseeker dot over here, which comes from kill command, will consume this buff. This buff that causes your next kill command to deal increased damage and hit additional targets and generate additional tip of the spear stacks. This one will just get munched and disappear from Bloodseeker ticks, which are happening all the time. That's why I say 90% of the time, like this, the second half of this whole talent just doesn't work. With that said, it's still a pretty good talent. I just don't recommend you run it, but it's not like it's terrible. But yeah, that's the other thing. Then there's Ruthless Marauder, which is what I recommend you use most of the time. Very recently, we learned that Sims were actually underestimating this talent because they were actually assuming that the haste buff part of it was working even when you didn't have it talented. So that was just a sim bug. Those things happen, and it's good that that the smart people noticed. But it basically has elevated the value of this talent to the point that it's now just optimal in all scenarios. So now the main real choice we have is, what about flanking and what about sulfur-aligned pockets? Now, in a pure, on paper, if you just a flat AoE or even single target situation in many cases, sulfur-aligned pockets is very competitive and will even outcompete flanking strike a lot of the time. You might think, well, flanking strike is an extra button I have to worry about, and sulfur-aligned pockets is just this cool passive thing. Correct, but it does have one major disadvantage. So what do sulfur-aligned pockets do? Every 3 quick shots is replaced with an explosive shot at 100% effectiveness. That's fine. What are quick shots? It's basically when you cast kill commands, you sometimes fire arcane shots, and every 3 times this happens, you will get the next one will turn into an explosive shot. Nothing wrong with that, except this explosive shot that gets cast from sulfur-aligned pockets will consume your Bombardier proc. What is Bombardier? This is the thing that at the end of your coordinated assault, you explosive shots cooldown is reset, and the next one will hit 2 additional targets. So it's a free target explosive shot, which is a super insanely powerful button. The problem, of course, is that because the cooldown, we have this proc for a whole minute, and we really need at least 3 targets to get full value out of this button. So in many cases, we will want to hold our Bombardier for ad spawns or a bigger pull or something like that. In many cases, it's optimal to hold your Bombardier explosive shot for the best possible time. Not least because we also want to tip with a spear this Bombardier explosive shot. Normally we don't care that much about whether we tip our explosive shots, but the Bombardier explosive shots we always want to. But the problem is that we can't just stop pressing kill commands in our rotation, right? Which means that randomly your Bombardier explosive shot is just going to get eaten when you press kill command in your normal rotation because of sulfur-aligned pockets. So in other words, sulfur-aligned pockets is solid in a sort of static environment where the target count doesn't change, you're always on AoE or whatever, but it prevents you being able to be smart about your Bombardier usage. Because it will basically just munch it for you whether you like it or not, and you will not be able to guarantee that it's going to be tipped at all times, which is super inconvenient. So for this reason, I do not recommend sulfur-aligned pockets in most scenarios, at least if you were being optimal. However, if you are relatively new to survival, you've just picked up your spear and you've seen that it's doing pretty well in Mythic Plus for hunters right now, at least relatively speaking, I think it's completely fine to run sulfur-aligned pockets, not least because you save the keybind on flanking strike. So I would call what you're seeing on screen right now the optimal beginner build. It has one fewer button than the optimal build. It's pretty straightforward to play. While you're still learning the spec and thinking about all these things that go into it, you're probably not thinking about optimal Bombardier usage. That's some sort of more of an advanced thing when you're sort of comfortable with the baseline of the spec. So I wouldn't say that the disadvantage doesn't really matter that much at that point. But once you want to step it up to the big leagues, I recommend swapping sulfur-aligned pockets out for flanking strike to basically make this build that you're looking at the screen right now. My guide on Icy Veins, as always, is updated with this information. So, you can check that in the description below as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Under 10 minutes. If you have any questions pertaining to survival or this video, please leave them in the comments below. I do intend to make a survival sort of video guide at some point, but do keep in mind that I have a extensive written and always updated written guide on Icy Veins that I will link in the description below. I know a lot of you are visual learners, so you want the video, and I hope to be making that soon. But until then, check out the guide, and I hope this talent primer was useful to you. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.